I have the privilege of introducing my friend Adam Miller, a VP of Engineering. One of the biggest questions I always get is, how do things happen on Roblox? And I thought, who better to bring up than Adam Miller? So take it away.
Hello, everybody. All right, wait, no, I got this one. Okay, everyone can hear me okay? Okay, cool. So today I'm going to talk about how changes are made on Roblox. And this is a really big subject, so this is a bit of an introduction. And what I'm really going to focus on today is our shipping process, sort of the development and shipping process. How we build these features, how we test them, how we get them out to our developers, and that full process. And I want to give you guys a bit of an insight into what goes on behind the scenes when you're sitting there waiting, like, where's this feature? Why isn't this shipped yet? There's a good reason for it. And we're working hard, and this will give you a little insight into the factory of how we churn out these features. So the first question of how we ship things starts with what we work on. And this is a really big, really interesting talk that I am not going to do today because it's out of the scope of this session. So I'm going to do a standalone talk on that another time. But the short of it is we figure out with a dialogue between Roblox and our community of developers and players what are the important things we need. We figure out which things are aligned with our big vision. And then when it comes to scheduling, to plan when we want to ship stuff. So again, big talk on that someday. Look out for that at another RDC. So what I'm going to do now is walk through a couple examples of how we shipped things and give you guys some insight into that process. So we're going to start out with an easy example. And it's an easy example because it's an additive thing. We shipped something that added something to our platform that's relatively straightforward. So mobile portrait mode. What is portrait mode? So historically, all games in Roblox were landscape. It's the right to left one. A lot of mobile games actually work better in portrait. And this wasn't available on Roblox. So we wanted to support this as an option. So thinking about this, it's something we wanted to do for years. And we've had a couple of big pushes at different times to really focus on making great mobile games. So when it came to the scheduling of this feature, we wrapped it into a larger process of really focusing on great phone games for a year. So in early 2017 is when we started prototyping and building the portrait mode functionality. And so that meant the basic functionality of swapping your UI, giving the developer APIs that allowed querying and setting the mode. And then actually one of the biggest parts was rebuilding all of our core scripts and our core UI to work in portrait. So in this design phase, there was one really big question that we had to think about. And this is something that happens a lot when Roblox wants to build something. We sit back and we think, okay, what is the right way to do this? We want to make sure we get it as right as possible. And the big question we had, can games change their orientation while playing? So the advantage to doing that is it's the maximum flexibility, right? Games can switch anytime they want to. The disadvantage is it has a lot of complexity to the whole system, both to our own UI and every game's UI. If you have to code every UI, like the screen might switch. So we thought about it a lot, and we decided to go for the more flexible approach And I think that was actually the right choice. I feel good about it now. So it's the maximum flexibility, and it's worth it for our system. So this was a big question we had, and that was one of the biggest challenges with this feature, was wrestling with that design question. So once we had our design question settled, our internal functionality built, the next step is to roll it out. So this is something I want to give everyone a little bit of insight into this process. So first we build and test internally, use our QA team, check features, have developers try things out, make sure everything would work. Then we released as an optional but not a default feature. So that let games opt into using portrait mode. And this is a really easy way to ship something when it's an option. A developer can try it out. If it doesn't work quite right, they give us feedback. And then we can iterate and improve things. And then as we're shipping, of course, we provide all that extra infrastructure that allows developers to take advantage of this stuff. So our documentation, our APIs, our examples, the communication, the outreach, things like that. Now, when it comes to shipping live, one of the biggest challenges we have is thinking about all the different versions of Roblox that are live at the same time. Because, of course, we're live on PC, Mac, iOS, Android, and Xbox. Not all the versions are always up to date. So we have this rolling release process. And if you see this graph here, this actually represents how many people are on each different version of our iOS client. This is taken somewhat recently. But you can see when a new version comes out, it quickly shoots up as people update. And the other ones start to die down, but they don't completely go away. So this is really important because if you have something like portrait mode, you better make sure every version out there of Roblox knows how to handle portrait mode. Otherwise, your game is going to be in deep doo-doo. So we do this thing called force upgrade. So at some point, we'll say, OK, enough people are on the latest version or the latest couple of versions. Anyone who's older, you just get forced. And when you load up the app, you're forced to upgrade. And that's how we ensure there's like a minimum version. So with something like portrait mode, we did that. We made sure every live version was up to date, and then we could turn it live. So what are the results? We had a successful release. And with this kind of feature, we saw gradual adoption. So it was something where not a lot of old games were converted, but new games like Shred were built using portrait mode. And Meep CD added portrait mode for fishing. Anyone who here has tried portrait mode on a phone? Yeah, quite a lot of people. All right, cool. OK, so that's our overview of the easy version. So I'm going to dive a little bit into the harder version, which is smooth terrain. And it was hard because this wasn't just additive. So I'll get to that. Concept behind smooth terrain, I think most of you here are probably familiar with it. So we had an original Roblox terrain system, dated from 2011. And it was blocky, really chunky, looked kind of antiquated, and we realized we wanted to bring it up to a more modern look. So this guy called Arseny, during a hack week, some of you have heard of him, he built a prototype of a new smooth terrain system. This is not actually a screenshot of that, but I couldn't find one, so this is the best I could do. But this is the basic look, and this is the fundamentals of how Roblox terrain looks today. So as part of the prototype, it proved the viability of this approach in terms of the look, how characters would interact with it, and how physics would work. So how did we go to ship this? So in 2014, in April, we started the work, and it took about a year to ship our first version. And the first version is what we called an MVP, a minimum viable product. And it had 8 materials, had the basic Lua APIs, And we provided a terrain editor in Studio, so a great interface for manipulating and creating terrain. And at this point, things were still in the easy mode where there was a setting inside your place that said old terrain or smooth terrain. No problem, right? So we shipped it as an option and quickly got a lot of adoption. People began to use this. And as people kept using it, they'd give us lots of feedback. And we'd use that feedback to make smooth terrain better. So for about a year, year and a half, we would iterate on making our smooth terrain more effective. So we'd get it more efficient. We added materials. We added changing colors. That's like green water you can see there. Adding waves, stuff like that. So we'd add features, we'd make it more efficient, we'd fix problems that people have until we felt like we got it to a place where it was so good, we had a big question to ask. Do we remove the old terrain? So there's some valid question, right? Should we just keep the old terrain forever? It's got its look. There's these games built for it. But there's a price to pay. And that price is maintaining 2 entire systems forever. And that slows down development speed. Every feature we build has to take both into account. It adds memory and all this kind of stuff. So we made the difficult decision that we wanted to remove the old terrain and just have smooth terrain. Removing things on Roblox is hard. We take our commitment very seriously about supporting the features that we release. So thinking about this, we started by gathering data. We implemented a whole new system that measured the playing time in games with smooth versus old terrain. So we would look not just at how many places existed or any metric like that, but actually how much time players spent in games with each system. And by August 2016, the ratio of new to old was 8:1. So a lot of good feeling there that we'd centered on a new approach that could be the only one. Okay, the hard part. How did we remove the old terrain? So first we marked old terrain as deprecated. That's easy. That's a signal to the developers that we're not going to be continuing support for it. We gave a 6-month warning that old terrain was going to go away. So you'd open up Studio and you'd get a warning, ding, watch out. And we'd reach out to the developers who are using old terrain. And we would talk with them and explain to them what was going to happen, and also work with them if they needed help on conversion. And speaking of conversion, we had a conversion button. So one click and you'd convert your old terrain to your smooth terrain. So eventually, after this 6-month period, all the warning, we had a go live day. And on that day, all the places with old terrain, as soon as they would run in production, they would just load up and be automatically converted to new terrain. So there was no more old terrain. We handled that kind of transparently. Now, it's not an exact one-to-one, right? So the old terrain to the new terrain, you can convert. It's going to look a little bit different. It might feel a little bit different, but that was a hard choice we made, and that's how we did it. And so after that, we're in this new golden era. We have one terrain system, and we just kept improving it. So we added a bunch of features that people are probably familiar with. Control over the colors for all the different parts, faster rendering, reducing memory, and there's going to be a lot more to come in the future. So the summary of this whole system is we're very careful about what we ship. We want to maintain this contract, this implied contract we have with our developers, where we build things and then we stand by them and support them. And so there's a lot of care when we want to change or remove things. And fundamentally, when we think about our future development and our long-term vision, we want to build the features that push our platform forward in that direction. All right. Questions? Sorry?
Is the same thing going to happen like R15? Like in future, could R6 be removed and be a place of R15, and all places using R6 will be automatically converted to R15? Could that possibly happen to the humanoid model type?
That's a good question. We're going to potentially do the same thing for R6 to R15. There are no plans of that right now. We are definitely committed to providing that R6 look and feel indefinitely. So there's some potential that you can get that look inside an R15 construct, if that makes sense. But we won't be taking away that appearance.
I have a game called Super Starter Games, and converting to R15 takes a lot of time because a lot of the armors in the game are CSG based. I have to fix it, and the animations too, and that takes time.
Yeah, don't worry. There are no plans. You're good.
Okay, thank you.
Say I'm a developer.
Yeah.
And I think I have a brilliant idea of like what my game needs, and I would like Roblox to listen to me. How do I make that happen?
So there are a lot of great ways to communicate to Roblox. Our developer relations team is phenomenal. And some of these ways are developer forum, Twitter, in-person, incubator and accelerator programs, developer forum, lots of great stuff. Anything else you'd suggest?
We do read your dev forum. I read your dev forum. But how? So another question that often comes up is, what's a good feature request? How do you write a good feature request?
So, good question. So a good feature request carefully explains the problem and not just the solution. So a feature request always starts with a vision of what you're trying to achieve. So it might be something like, I'm trying to make a game, and I've got a volcano, and I want to explode all this lava up in the sky. And I'm having trouble with that because blah, blah, blah. The less helpful feature request is, you need to change this API to add this extra parameter that sets like the secret transparency of this part, and not really explain why. And you're like, well, that's just like a solution, and we don't really understand the problem. So good feature requests always start with the problem, and ideally grow to include related problems so we can understand related solutions.
I guess I kind of a specific kind of question, kind of similar to the terrain.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know if there's any plans on like phasing out like the old versus the new physics, or like the old versus the new lighting?
Good question. So yeah, so with physics, we are planning to phase out the old physics, and we're working on that right now. And we believe we can do that because we believe our new physics engine can be made almost strictly better. It's pretty analogous to the smooth terrain versus the blocky terrain. We think we can be better in just about every circumstance, or close enough. And so we are actually following a very similar process to we did with the terrain, where we iterate with developers. We look at which developers still use the old physics system. We talk to them, and we figure out what their needs are, and then we ship improvements to kind of cover all those needs. And it's like, okay, we're just going to keep knocking out all those needs. Once we feel like there's nothing left, we're going to feel comfortable to move everything to new physics. Because just like with two terrain systems, we don't want to have two physics systems hanging around forever. With lighting, it's a bit of a different story. So we don't have any plans to remove our old voxel lighting for the foreseeable future because we are going to need it on lower-end devices. And it's still somewhat of an open question whether everyone is going to prefer the new lighting system or not. I was talking to one of the Hexaria developers today. He's like, yeah, the old lighting looks better for Hexaria. I'm like, all right, well, you can maintain that option. So we'll see. We'll learn more about that over time.
So like normally when we would make a feature request on the dev forums, so what's the like normal timescale between that being like submitted and then that being considered and then work being begun on that?
Yeah, usually like no more than like 24 hours. Anything you submit is usually, no, I'm kidding. So it depends a lot on the feature. We do look at everything. So we have an amazing developer relations team. And what they will do is coalesce input from all these different sources into themes. And they will have meetings every couple of weeks to discuss the latest requests. Now, obviously, if there's something that comes in that's an emergency, like, oh, my game's broken or whatever, then that's a whole separate story. But when it comes to things like new feature development that's part of maybe a longer-term roadmap, every couple of weeks we'll discuss these big things and we'll say, okay, is this aligned with our vision? And if it is, what's the right way to schedule it? And it might be in the next couple months. It might be like, hey, that's something we're going to get to someday, but we don't have time to do it right now. So it really depends a lot on the size of the ask and where it fits on our bigger roadmap. Sometimes the best ones, the ones that make me feel best, are when we see something and somebody will present it and be like, we'll be like, huh, that's a really good idea. That's not that hard. We can just kind of get that in there. So we love those because that's like such an efficient way to deliver value. The tough ones are like, oh, I need to have like 8 billion parts, stuck into a cube or something, and I'm like, all right, someday, yeah.
But we do look at the number of likes, the cross sample of the variety of developers who are commenting on the thread too, because then that gives us an indicator that like it's not just top devs asking for it, but a various skill of developers asking for it, because then we see it as a need for the whole community as well. And then if you complain like in a constructive way, it also gives us also feedback as well. But thank you for Adam, and he will be in the back to answer more of your questions.